The wildflowers swayed in rhythm with the lone woman dancing in the meadow just outside Eager, Arizona territory, and Isaac Sullivan felt his heart stop when he saw her from the ridge above. It was late summer of 1883, and the afternoon sun painted the grassland in shades of amber and gold. Isaac had been riding fence lines for the ranch where he worked, checking for breaks and weak posts, when movement in the valley below caught his attention. He reined in his mare and watched, transfixed, as the woman spun and stepped through the tall grass, her dark hair loose and flowing behind her like a banner. She wore a simple calico dress of pale blue, and even from this distance, he could see how completely lost she was in the music only she could hear. Isaac was 26 years old and had spent the last 8 years working cattle drives and ranch work across Arizona and New Mexico territories. He had seen plenty of sights in his time, from thundering stampedes to painted desert sunsets, but nothing had ever struck him quite like the vision of this dancing woman. There was something pure and joyful in her movements, something that called to a part of him that had been dormant for too long. Before he could talk himself out of it, Isaac urged his horse down the slope toward the meadow. The woman did not notice him at first, so absorbed was she in her solitary dance. As he drew closer, he could hear her humming a melody, some old tune that sounded vaguely familiar. She turned and swayed, arms extended as if holding an invisible partner, and Isaac felt an unexpected ache in his chest at the thought of her dancing alone. He dismounted about 20 feet away, not wanting to startle her. The sound of his boots hitting the ground finally caught her attention, and she stopped mid-spin, her eyes wide with surprise. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other across the meadow grass. She was younger than he had thought at first, probably around 22 or 23, with a heart-shaped face and eyes the color of dark honey. Her cheeks were flushed from dancing, and strands of her nearly black hair clung to her forehead. Even in her evident surprise, there was no fear in her expression, only curiosity. "I apologize for interrupting," Isaac said, removing his hat. "I saw you from up on the ridge, and I thought maybe you might like a real partner." The woman tilted her head, studying him with those remarkable eyes. A smile slowly curved her lips. "And you think you can keep up with me, Cowboy?" "I reckon I can try, miss," Isaac replied, his own smile matching hers. "Zara," she said, still not moving from her spot in the grass. "Zara Fitzgerald. And I will warn you now that I do not dance the way most folks dance. I make up my own steps as I go." "Isaac Sullivan," he introduced himself, taking a few steps closer. "And that suits me just fine. I have never been much for following rules anyway." Zara laughed then, a sound that seemed to ripple through the meadow like water over stones. She held out her hand to him, and Isaac closed the remaining distance between them in 3 long strides. Her hand was warm and surprisingly strong when he took it, her fingers calloused in a way that spoke of hard work. "There is no music," Zara pointed out as Isaac placed his other hand carefully at her waist. "Then we will make our own," he said, and they did. Zara began humming again, that same wandering melody from before, and Isaac found himself moving with her through the grass. She was right that she made up her own steps, flowing from one movement to another without any pattern he could predict. But somehow, Isaac found himself able to follow, to anticipate her turns and spins. When she moved away from him, he let her go but stayed close, and when she came back, he was there to catch her. They danced until the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Zara's humming had faded to contented silence, but they kept moving together, finding a rhythm in the soft sound of their feet through the grass and their synchronized breathing. Isaac could not remember the last time he had felt so completely present in a moment, so utterly alive. Finally, as the first stars began to prick through the darkening sky, they came to a natural stop. Zara was still in his arms, her hands resting on his shoulders, and they were both breathing hard from the exertion. Up close, Isaac could see the exact pattern of gold flecks in her brown eyes, could smell the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair. "I should probably head back before full dark," Zara said softly, though she made no move to step away from him. "Where is back?" Isaac asked, equally reluctant to break their connection. "My father has a small ranch about 2 miles east of here. The Fitzgerald place, though most folks in Eager just call it the widow's ranch since my mother passed 5 years ago." There was a flicker of old grief in her eyes as she spoke. "I am sorry for your loss," Isaac said sincerely. Zara nodded her acknowledgement. "And you, where do you call home?" "I work for the Thompson outfit about 4 miles north. Been there going on 3 months now." Isaac finally, reluctantly, let his hands drop from her waist, though he kept hold of one of her hands. "Can I ride with you? Make sure you get home safe." "I walked here," Zara said. "And I have been making this walk alone for months now. I like to come to this meadow when I need to think, when I need to feel free for a little while." "Then I will walk with you if you will have me," Isaac offered. "My horse will follow along behind." Zara's smile returned, warm and genuine. "I would like that." They walked side by side through the growing darkness, Isaac leading his mare by the reins with one hand while his other remained gently clasped around Zara's. She told him about her life on the ranch, how she and her father managed with the help of 2 hired hands. Her mother had died of fever, leaving Zara, at 17, to take over running the household while her father, Donald Fitzgerald, focused on the cattle and horses. "I love the work," Zara said as they navigated a dry creek bed. "But sometimes I feel like I am just going through motions, you know. Wake up, cook, clean, mend, tend the garden, cook again, sleep, repeat. That meadow, those dances, they are the only time I feel like myself anymore. Like I am Zara and not just someone's daughter or someone's cook or someone's anything." Isaac understood more than she might have guessed. "I have been moving from job to job for 8 years now. Sometimes I wonder if I am moving towards something or just running from staying still." "And have you figured it out yet?" Zara asked. "No," Isaac admitted. "But today, for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe I should stop running and see what happens if I just stay put for a bit." They walked in companionable silence for a while after that, until the lights of the Fitzgerald ranch came into view over the next rise. It was a modest spread, with a small main house, a barn, and a couple of outbuildings visible in the moonlight. A dog started barking as they approached, and Zara called out to quiet it. "That is Rufus," she said affectionately. "He sounds fierce, but he is really just a coward who is afraid of his own shadow." As if to prove her point, a lanky hound came bounding up to them, tail wagging furiously. Zara bent to scratch his ears while Isaac's mare snorted and shifted uneasily behind him. The front door of the house opened and a man stepped out onto the porch, silhouetted by the lamplight from inside. "Zara, that you?" "Yes, Pa," Zara called back. "I've got company." Donald Fitzgerald was a tall man, lean and weathered by years of outdoor work. He was probably in his early 50s, with gray threading through his dark hair and a cautious set to his shoulders as he watched Isaac approach with his daughter. His eyes, Isaac noted, were the same warm brown as Zara's. "Pa, this is Isaac Sullivan. He works for the Thompson place." "Isaac, my father, Donald Fitzgerald." Isaac extended his hand, meeting the older man's measuring gaze steadily. "Sir, I came across your daughter dancing in the meadow west of here. I walked her home to make sure she got back safe." Donald's handshake was firm, his calluses matching his daughter's. Dancing in the meadow was she. There was something knowing in his tone, almost amused. She does that. Worried me sick the first few times she disappeared until I figured out where she was going. I am 22 years old, Pa, Zara said with good-natured exasperation. And it is not even 2 miles. I know, Donald said, but his expression was fond. You hungry, Sullivan? We already ate, but there is plenty left over. Isaac was about to politely decline when his stomach betrayed him with a loud rumble. Zara laughed, and even Donald cracked a smile. I reckon that is a yes, the older man said. Come on in. You can put your horse in the corral for now. Over a late supper of beef stew and cornbread, Isaac learned more about the Fitzgerald family. Donald had come west from Missouri in 1865, right after the war ended, bringing his new wife Catherine with him. They had built the ranch from nothing, survived drought and raids and hard winters. Zara had been born in 1861, making her 22, and she was their only child. We had hoped for more, Donald said quietly, but the good Lord had other plans. Zara has been blessing enough for 2 lifetimes, though. Zara blushed at the praise but said nothing, busying herself with clearing the dishes. Isaac stood to help, and they worked together in an easy rhythm that felt natural despite having met only hours before. When the kitchen was clean, Isaac knew he should head back to the Thompson ranch, but he found himself reluctant to leave. Donald must have sensed his hesitation because he said, "Too dark to ride back safely now. You are welcome to sleep in the barn if you like. We have got clean hay and extra blankets." "I appreciate that, sir," Isaac said gratefully. Zara walked him out to the barn, carrying a lantern and an armful of blankets. The barn was well kept and warm, smelling of hay and horses and leather. She helped him spread the blankets in an empty stall, and they stood facing each other in the golden lamplight. "Will you come back?" Zara asked, her voice soft but her gaze direct. "Yes," Isaac said without hesitation. "If you want me to." "I do," Zara said simply. Isaac reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "Then I will be back. Maybe next Sunday, if that suits you." "Sunday would be perfect," Zara said, her face tilting slightly into his touch. They stood like that for a long moment, neither wanting to be the first to pull away. Finally, Zara stepped back with visible reluctance. "Good night, Isaac Sullivan." "Good night, Zara Fitzgerald." He watched her walk back to the house, her skirts swaying, the dog Rufus trotting at her heels. When she reached the porch, she turned and waved, and Isaac waved back, feeling something shift and settle in his chest, like a compass finally finding true north. That Sunday, Isaac rode back to the Fitzgerald ranch with his best shirt clean and his hair freshly cut. Zara met him at the door wearing a green dress that brought out the gold in her eyes, her hair pinned up in a way that made her neck look graceful and long. They attended church services in Eager together, sitting side by side in the wooden pew while the preacher spoke about faith and perseverance. After the service, Zara introduced Isaac to what felt like half the town. There was Mrs. Henderson, who ran the general store with her husband, the Riley family, who had the ranch neighboring the Fitzgeralds, young Tom Porter, who worked as a blacksmith's apprentice and clearly had a crush on Zara that she seemed oblivious to. Everyone was friendly enough, though Isaac noticed a few of the older women eyeing him with open speculation. "They are already planning our wedding," Zara whispered to him as they walked back to where he had tied his horse. "Mrs. Henderson will have picked out the flowers and Mrs. Garrett will have decided what kind of cake we should have." "And what do you think we should have?" Isaac asked, enjoying the way her cheeks flushed. "I think we should probably have more than one Sunday together before we start planning anything," Zara said, but she was smiling. They spent the afternoon at the meadow, their meadow now, though neither had spoken the words aloud yet. This time they did not dance. Instead, they sat in the grass and talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives, their dreams, their fears. Isaac told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 17, about the loneliness that had driven him to keep moving for so long. Zara told him about the pressure she felt to marry well, to secure the ranch's future, even as she resisted the idea of marrying someone she did not love. "Pa would never force me," she said, "but I know he worries about what will happen when he is gone. The ranch is not big enough to be really profitable, and without a man to run it, everyone assumes it will just fail." "Do you want to keep the ranch?" Isaac asked. Zara was quiet for a moment, pulling up pieces of grass and letting them fall through her fingers. "I do not know. I love the land, love the work when I am doing it. But I also wonder what else is out there, what else I could be. Does that make me ungrateful?" "No," Isaac said firmly. "It makes you human." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and purple, Isaac took Zara's hand and pulled her to her feet. "Dance with me." This time when they danced, it was slower, more intimate. Isaac hummed a tune his mother used to sing, and Zara followed his lead, her body fitting against his like they had been dancing together for years instead of days. When the last light faded from the sky, Isaac walked her home again, and at her door, he worked up the courage to kiss her cheek. Her skin was soft and warm, and she smiled up at him with such unguarded happiness that Isaac felt his heart turn over in his chest. "Next Sunday?" she asked. "And maybe Wednesday too," Isaac suggested hopefully. "Wednesday too," Zara agreed. That Wednesday, Isaac rode over after finishing his work for the day. He found Zara in the garden behind the house, pulling weeds and singing to herself. She looked up when she heard him approach, her face lighting up in a way that made the long ride worthwhile. They walked to the meadow again, and this time they did dance, picking up where they had left off on Sunday as if no time had passed at all. This became their pattern over the following weeks. Sunday after church, Wednesday evening, and sometimes Saturday afternoons if Isaac could get away from the Thompson ranch. They danced, they talked, they learned each other in the way that new lovers do, discovering preferences and quirks and the small details that make a person who they are. Isaac learned that Zara hated coffee but loved tea, that she could outshoot most men with a rifle, that she had taught herself to read music from an old book her mother had brought from Missouri. Zara learned that Isaac had a fine singing voice that he was shy about using, that he had a gift with horses, that he dreamed of someday having a place of his own where he could raise and train horses properly. As September turned to October, Isaac realized he was in love. He had never been in love before, had never even been sure he believed in it beyond the poetic words in songs and stories. But there was no other word for what he felt when he looked at Zara, no other explanation for why her happiness had become more important than his own, why the thought of a future without her felt impossible to contemplate. He was fairly certain she felt the same way, could see it in how she looked at him, in how she reached for his hand without thinking, in how she fit herself against him when they danced. But neither of them had spoken the words yet, as if saying them aloud might somehow break the spell they were under. It was Donald who finally forced the issue. One evening in late October, when Isaac arrived for his usual Wednesday visit, the older man asked him to stay behind for a moment while Zara went to change out of her work dress. "You have been courting my daughter for near about 2 months now," Donald said without preamble. They were standing in the barn, and Donald was ostensibly checking on a mare who was due to foal any day, but his attention was clearly on Isaac. I need to know what your intentions are. Isaac had known this conversation was coming and had already decided on his answer. I love her, sir. I want to marry her if she will have me. Donald looked up from the mare, his expression unreadable. You got anything to offer her? The Thompson place pay well enough for you to support a wife. I have been saving my wages, Isaac said. I have got about $300 put away. It is not much, but it is a start, and I am a good worker, sir. I can make a living for us. What about the ranch? Donald asked. Zara loves this place, even if she does not always admit it. You willing to help me work it? Eventually take it over when I am too old to do it myself. Isaac had thought about this too, had lain awake nights considering what marrying Zara would mean for his own dreams. I want to be honest with you, Mr. Fitzgerald. My dream has always been to train horses, to have my own operation someday. But I also love Zara more than I love any dream. If staying here and working this ranch is what she needs, then that is what I will do. Donald studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You are a good man, Isaac Sullivan, better than some of the others who have come sniffing around. You have my blessing to ask her if that is what you are working up to. Relief flooded through Isaac. Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. One more thing, Donald said, his expression turning serious. You hurt her, and I do not care how good a man you are, I will make you regret it. Understood. Understood, Isaac said, meeting the older man's eyes steadily. But I promise you, sir, hurting her is the last thing I would ever want to do. They shook hands on it. And then Zara was calling from the house that she was ready. And Isaac went to meet her with his heart pounding, and his mind already trying to figure out when and how to propose. He decided to wait until the following Sunday, wanting to make it special. All week, he thought about what he would say, how he would ask. He did not have a ring yet, but he planned to take her to the general store in Eager the following week to let her pick one out. Sunday dawned clear and cool, perfect autumn weather. Isaac rode to the Fitzgerald ranch with his carefully rehearsed words running through his mind. But when Zara came out to meet him, wearing a yellow dress he had never seen before and with her hair loose the way he loved it, all his prepared speeches fled his mind. They went to church, then rode out to the meadow as had become their custom. The aspens were turning gold, and the meadow grass had faded to wheat brown. Zara looked around with a little sigh. Winter will be here before we know it. We will not be able to come here much longer, at least not comfortably. We will find other places, Isaac said, dismounting and helping her down from her horse. Other ways to be together. Will we? Zara asked, and there was something in her voice that made Isaac look at her more closely. What is wrong? He asked. Zara walked a few steps away, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warmth of the day. Tom Porter asked me to marry him yesterday. After you left on Wednesday, he rode out to the ranch and spoke to my father. Isaac felt like he had been kicked in the chest. What did your father say? He told Tom that it was my decision to make. Zara turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Isaac, I need to know what this is between us, because Tom is offering me security, a future, a partnership in his blacksmith business. He is offering me certainty. And I care about him, even if I do not love him. But I love you, and I need to know if you love me too, if this is going somewhere, or if we are just dancing in a meadow until one of us gets tired and moves on. Isaac closed the distance between them in 3 long strides, taking her face in his hands. I love you, Zara Fitzgerald. I have loved you since the moment I saw you dancing alone in this meadow. I was going to ask you today anyway, but now seems like the right time. Marry me, please. I do not have much to offer you right now except my heart and my promise that I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make you happy. Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks, but she was smiling. Yes, Yes, of course, yes. Isaac kissed her then, properly kissed her for the first time, and it felt like coming home. Zara's arms came around his neck, and she kissed him back with a fervor that left them both breathless. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing, giddy with joy and relief. "I need to tell Tom no," Zara said, still in Isaac's arms. "He deserves to know soon." "We can ride into town tomorrow if you want," Isaac offered. "Tell him together." "No," Zara said. "This is something I need to do myself, but thank you." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the meadow, making plans and dreaming about their future. Isaac told her about his conversation with her father, about Donald's blessing. Zara cried again, happy tears this time, and told Isaac how much it meant that he had approached her father properly. "When should we marry?" Zara asked as the sun began to lower in the sky. "As soon as you want," Isaac said. "Tomorrow, if you would have me." Zara laughed. "Let us give it at least a few weeks. I want a proper wedding, even if it is small. And we need to figure out where we are going to live, what we are going to do." "Your father offered to let us stay at the ranch, help him work it," Isaac said. "What do you think about that?" Zara was quiet for a moment, leaning against his chest while he held her. "I think it could work, at least for a while. The ranch is not big, but it could support 2 families if we work it right. And Pa is not getting any younger. He needs help. And eventually, when we have saved enough, we could expand," Isaac suggested. "Add that horse training operation I have been dreaming about, if that is something you would want." "I would want whatever makes you happy," Zara said, tilting her head back to look at him. "As long as we are together." They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, and Isaac formally announced their engagement to Donald over supper. The older man smiled, the first truly broad smile Isaac had seen from him, and shook Isaac's hand with genuine warmth. "Welcome to the family, son." The next day, Zara rode into Eager to speak with Tom Porter. When she returned, she looked sad but relieved. "He took it well," she told Isaac, who had come over after finishing work for the day. "Better than I expected, actually. He said he hoped we would be happy, and he meant it." They set the wedding date for the second Sunday in November, giving them just under 3 weeks to prepare. It was a small affair, held in the little church in Eager with most of the town in attendance. Zara wore her mother's wedding dress, which she and Mrs. Henderson had altered to fit her. Isaac wore his best suit, brushed and cleaned until it looked almost new, when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife. Isaac kissed Zara in front of God and everyone, and the little church erupted in applause and cheers. At the reception afterward, held in the church hall, they danced their first dance as a married couple, moving together in the same fluid, intuitive way they had that first day in the meadow. "We never did stop moving forward, did we?" Zara whispered to him as they swayed together. "No," Isaac agreed, holding her close. "And I do not intend to start now." They moved into the main house with Donald, taking over the bedroom that had belonged to Zara's parents. Donald insisted, saying he would be more comfortable in the smaller room that Zara had used since childhood. It felt strange at first, being married, living as husband and wife, but they settled into it quickly. Zara was right that they worked well together. They fell into an easy routine of shared labor and shared life. Isaac continued working for the Thompson Ranch through the end of November, saving every penny he could while also helping Donald with the Fitzgerald Ranch in the evenings and on Sundays. It was hard work, but Isaac did not mind. He had never been afraid of hard work, and now he had something worth working for. In early December, Mr. Thompson called Isaac into his office. The older rancher looked tired, his face lined with worry. "I am going to have to let you go, Sullivan," he said without preamble. "Cattle prices are down, and I cannot afford to keep all my hands through the winter. You have been a good worker, and I am sorry." Isaac took the news with as much grace as he could muster. He had been half expecting it, had heard the rumors about the Thompson ranch struggling. "I understand, sir. I appreciate the work you have given me." When he told Zara and Donald that evening, Donald surprised him by clapping him on the shoulder. "Maybe it is a blessing in disguise. We could use you here full-time if you are willing. The pay would not be much, just a share of whatever profit we make, but at least you would not have to ride back and forth every day. And we would be building something of our own," Zara added, taking Isaac's hand. "Building our future." So Isaac threw himself into working the Fitzgerald ranch full-time. They had about 50 head of cattle and a dozen horses, enough to keep them busy, but not enough to make them rich. Donald taught Isaac the specifics of the operation, which fence lines needed the most attention, which water sources were most reliable, how to read the weather signs that predicted hard winters or dry summers. The winter of 1883 into 1884 was harsh, with deep snows and bitter cold. They lost 3 head of cattle to the weather, which hurt, but it could have been worse. They spent the long evenings huddled around the fire, Donald telling stories of the old days while Zara mended and Isaac carved. He was making her a jewelry box, working on it a little bit each night and watching her face light up when she saw his progress made the painstaking work worthwhile. In late February, Zara told Isaac she was pregnant. They had been married just over 3 months, and the news filled Isaac with a joy so profound he could hardly speak. He held her close, his hand resting on her still flat stomach, and thought about how much his life had changed in less than a year. Donald was equally thrilled about becoming a grandfather, though he tried to hide it behind gruff practicality. "The baby can have Zara's old room," he announced at supper the night they told him. "We will need to get a cradle made. I might still have some of the wood I used for Zara's, stored up in the barn somewhere." As spring arrived and Zara's belly began to swell, Isaac found himself thinking more seriously about the future. The ranch was doing all right, but just all right was not enough anymore. He had a wife and soon a child to provide for. The horse training dream he had set aside began to niggle at him again, whispering possibilities. One evening in April, after Zara had gone to bed early, exhausted from her pregnancy, Isaac broached the subject with Donald. "I have been thinking about adding a horse training operation to the ranch," he said. "Nothing big at first, just taking on a few horses from neighboring ranches, breaking and training them for a fee. I am good with horses, always have been. It could bring in some extra income." Donald considered this, puffing on his pipe. "You would need to build a proper training corral, maybe a round pen. That would take time and materials." "I could do most of the work myself," Isaac said. "Use lumber from the old line shack up by the north pasture that is falling apart anyway. Start small and build up as we get more business." "All right," Donald said after a long moment. "Let us try it. Worst case, we are out some labor and lumber. Best case, we have got ourselves a new income stream." Isaac spent the next several weeks building a round pen and a smaller training corral near the barn. He worked on it in the early mornings before the day's other chores and in the evenings after supper. Zara would come sit on the fence and watch him work, her hands resting on her growing belly, and those moments of companionable silence became some of Isaac's favorites. By late May, the training facilities were complete, and Isaac put out word that he was available to break and train horses. The first few jobs came from neighbors who knew the Fitzgerald family and were willing to take a chance on Isaac's skills. He worked with each horse carefully, using patience and gentleness rather than force, and word began to spread that Isaac Sullivan had a gift. By the time Zara went into labor in early October, Isaac had a steady stream of horses to train and a growing reputation. The baby was born on a cool autumn morning, with Mrs. Henderson attending as midwife. It was a boy, healthy and loud, with a shock of dark hair like his mother and his father's long fingers. They named him Matthew Donald Sullivan, after no one in particular except that Zara had always liked the name Matthew, and Donald for his grandfather. Donald Fitzgerald held his grandson with shaking hands and tears running unashamedly down his weathered cheeks. "He is perfect," the older man whispered. "Just perfect." Being a father changed Isaac in ways he had not expected. The responsibility of it should have been terrifying, and in some ways it was, but mostly it just made him more determined to build a good life for his family. He worked harder than ever, balancing the ranch work with the horse training, and when he was not working, he was with Zara and Matthew, marveling at every small change and development. Matthew was a happy baby, quick to smile and relatively easy-tempered. He had his mother's brown eyes and his father's long limbs, and he seemed to love horses from the start. Even as a tiny infant, he would quiet when Isaac carried him out to the barn, soothed by the sounds and smells of the horses. As Matthew grew from infant to toddler, the ranch grew as well. The horse training business expanded until Isaac was turning away work, simply not having enough hours in the day to take on every horse that was offered to him. They hired a young man named James Crawford to help with the cattle side of things, freeing up Isaac to focus more on the horses. In the spring of 1886, when Matthew was 18 months old, Zara told Isaac she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder on her. She was tired and sick much more than she had been with Matthew, and Isaac worried constantly. But Zara was strong, stronger than he sometimes gave her credit for, and she pushed through. Their second child, a daughter they named Catherine Rose after Zara's mother and no one in particular, was born in November. She was smaller than Matthew had been, more delicate, with wispy blonde hair that everyone insisted she would grow out of, but never did. From the start, she was a daddy's girl, quieting for Isaac when she would not quiet for anyone else. Life settled into a busy but contented rhythm. Isaac and Zara were deeply, contentedly in love, even through the exhaustion of raising two young children and running a ranch. They still tried to steal moments alone when they could, sneaking away to the meadow on rare, quiet afternoons, dancing together in the barn when the children were asleep. In 1887, Donald started to slow down. He was 60 years old now, and the years of hard work were catching up with him. He developed a persistent cough that winter that scared them all, though he insisted it was nothing. But by spring, it was clear he was struggling. The doctor from town said it was consumption, that there was nothing to be done, except keep him comfortable. Donald Fitzgerald died in his sleep on a warm June night, with Zara holding one hand and Isaac holding the other. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had built from nothing, and Zara cried like Isaac had never seen her cry before. She had known it was coming, they all had, but that did not make it any easier. Matthew was almost 3 and did not really understand where Grandpa had gone. Catherine was just a baby, too young to remember the grandfather who had doted on her. It was that thought, more than anything, that broke Zara's heart. "She will never remember how much he loved her," she sobbed in Isaac's arms the night after the funeral. "Then we will tell her," Isaac promised, holding her tight. "We will tell them both stories about him every day until they feel like they knew him, even if they cannot quite remember." And they did. As the children grew, Isaac and Zara filled their heads with stories of Grandpa Donald, of how he had come west after the war, of how he had built the ranch with his bare hands, of how much he had loved his family. The stories became a part of the family mythology, as real and present as any memory. With Donald gone, The ranch belonged entirely to Isaac and Zara now. They continued to build it up, slowly but steadily. The horse training operation flourished, with Isaac developing a particular reputation for being able to work with difficult horses that others had given up on. They bought more land when they could afford it, expanding their grazing range, and by 1890 they had over 100 head of cattle and a string of horses that were the envy of the county. Matthew was 7 now, old enough to help with small chores around the ranch. He loved the horses as much as his father did and spent every free moment in the barn, watching Isaac work. Catherine was 4, a whirlwind of energy and opinions, keeping Zara constantly busy and frequently exasperated. In the fall of 1890, Zara surprised Isaac by announcing she was pregnant again. They had not exactly been trying to prevent it, but they had not been trying for another baby either, content with their 2 children. But the news brought joy nonetheless, a sense that their family was still growing, still evolving. This pregnancy was different from the previous 2. Zara felt good, healthy, and strong. And when the baby was born in April of 1891, it was another boy, big and healthy with a powerful set of lungs. They named him Thomas Isaac Sullivan, after no one in particular, except that Thomas was Zara's favorite saint, and they wanted him to carry Isaac's name as well. Thomas was different from his siblings from the start. Where Matthew had been easy and Catherine had been energetic, Thomas was determined. He knew what he wanted and would not be dissuaded, whether it was a particular toy or to be held by a particular person. It was exhausting and endearing in equal measure. The 1890s rolled on, bringing changes big and small. Eager grew from a tiny settlement to a proper town, with a railroad spur and a new school. Matthew started attending in 1891, riding into town each day on a gentle mare named Daisy. Catherine followed in 1893, and the house felt strangely empty during the day without their noise and chaos. Isaac was 38 years old in 1895, and Zara was 34. They had been married for almost 12 years, and somehow, impossibly, Isaac loved her more with each passing year. She was no longer the carefree girl dancing in the meadow, though that girl still peeked out sometimes in quiet moments. She was a mother, a rancher, a woman who had weathered loss and joy and everything in between. Her hair had started to thread with gray, and there were lines around her eyes that had not been there when they met. But to Isaac, she had never been more beautiful. One evening in late summer, after the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Isaac took Zara's hand and led her out to the meadow. They had not been there together in months, maybe longer. Life had a way of filling up all the available time, leaving little for frivolous things like dancing in meadows. But tonight, the moon was full and bright, and Isaac wanted to remember. Wanted to take his wife back to where it all began and remind them both of who they had been, who they still were underneath all the responsibilities and roles they had taken on. "You remember the first time we danced here?" Isaac asked as they stood in the silvery moonlight, the grass whispering around them. "Of course I remember," Zara said, moving into his arms as naturally as breathing. "I thought you were the bravest man I had ever met, riding down from that ridge to join a strange woman dancing alone." "I thought you were a vision," Isaac confessed, beginning to move with her in a slow circle. "Something not quite real, too beautiful to be true." They danced without music, just as they had that first time, finding their rhythm in each other and in the soft sounds of the night around them. And for a little while, they were not parents or ranchers or anything else. They were just Isaac and Zara, 2 people who had found each other in a meadow and had never stopped moving forward. "Are you happy?" Zara asked after a while, her head resting on his shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible," Isaac said honestly. "Are you?" "Yes," Zara said simply. "Even with all the hard parts, all the losses and struggles, I would not change a single moment, because all of it led here to us." They stayed in the meadow until the moon began to set, talking and dancing and simply being together. When they finally headed home, walking hand in hand through the darkness, Isaac felt something settle in his soul, a deep contentment that he knew would carry him through whatever came next. The years continued to pass, as years do. Matthew grew into a serious young man with his father's gift for horses and his mother's steady practicality. He started working the ranch full-time when he turned 15, foregoing further schooling to learn the business from his father. Isaac was proud of him, proud of the man he was becoming, though he sometimes worried that Matthew was taking on too much responsibility too young. Catherine was 12 in 1898, caught in that awkward space between childhood and womanhood. She had her mother's independence and her father's stubbornness, and the combination made for some heated discussions around the dinner table. She wanted to go to the new high school in the bigger town 20 miles away, wanted to see something beyond the ranch and eager. Isaac and Zara were divided on whether to let her, both understanding her desire for more but also reluctant to let her go. Thomas was 7, still young enough to be more interested in playing than working, though he helped where he could. He had inherited his father's singing voice and his mother's love of music, and Zara had started teaching him to read music using her mother's old book, the same one she had taught herself from years ago. In the fall of 1898, Matthew met a girl. Her name was Sarah Mills, and her family had recently moved to Eager from Kansas. She was 17 to Matthew's 16, a quiet girl with red hair and freckles and a sharp mind. Matthew was smitten almost immediately, and Isaac recognized the look in his son's eyes because he had worn that same look himself once upon a time. Watching his son fall in love brought back a flood of memories for Isaac. He remembered the terror and exhilaration of it, the way it felt like the whole world had shifted on its axis. He gave Matthew the same advice his own father had given him, though he had been too young to appreciate it at the time. Be honest, be kind, and never take her for granted. Every day, choose to love her. It is not always easy, but it is always worth it. Matthew took the advice to heart, courting Sarah with a sweetness that made Zara tear up when she talked about it. They were married in the spring of 1900, a simple ceremony followed by a reception at the ranch. Sarah was a good match for Matthew, steady and hardworking, and she fit into the ranch life like she had always been there. Isaac and Zara gave Matthew and Sarah the original homestead cabin to live in. It had been used for storage for years, but they fixed it up, making it into a snug home for the newlyweds. Having them close but in their own space felt right, allowing Matthew to take on more responsibility for the ranch while still being able to learn from Isaac. Catherine did go away to school eventually, wearing down her parents' resistance with the sheer force of her determination. She came home for holidays and summers, full of stories about her classes and her friends and all the things she was learning. Isaac missed her terribly, but he was proud of her too, proud that she had the courage to chase what she wanted. Thomas, meanwhile, was growing into his own person. At 10 years old in 1901, he announced that he did not want to be a rancher when he grew up. He wanted to be a teacher, wanted to work with music. It was not what Isaac had expected, and he would be lying if he said it did not sting a little. But Zara reminded him that they had 3 children and a son-in-law already invested in the ranch. Letting Thomas follow his own path was not a loss. It was a gift. In 1903, Matthew and Sarah had their first child, a little girl they named Eliza after Sarah's mother. Isaac held his granddaughter with the same sense of wonder he had felt holding his own children, marveling at her tiny fingers and the impossible softness of her skin. He was a grandfather now, which made him feel ancient and blessed in equal measure. Zara took to grandmotherhood with enthusiasm, spoiling Eliza shamelessly and defending her right to do so when Isaac teased her about it. "I did my time being the responsible one," she informed him with mock severity. "Grandmothers get to be fun." Catherine came home for good in 1904, diploma in hand and plans in her head. She had met a young man at school, a lawyer named Henry Simmons, and they were engaged to be married. The wedding was in June, a bigger affair than Matthew's had been, reflecting Catherine's larger personality. Henry was a good man, smart and kind, and while he was not a rancher, he was willing to learn enough to help when needed. They moved to the bigger town where Henry practiced law, but they visited often, especially after their first child was born in 1905, a boy they named William. Watching Catherine with her son, Isaac saw flashes of Zara in her, the same fierce love and protective instinct. Thomas left for college in 1908, heading to the Territorial University in Tucson. Arizona had not yet achieved statehood, though everyone said it was coming soon. Thomas wrote home regularly, letters full of his studies and his experiences, and Isaac saved everyone, even the ones that made no sense to him because they were so full of musical theory and pedagogical philosophy. By 1910, Isaac was 53 years old, and Zara was 49. The ranch was thriving under Matthew's increasingly skilled management, allowing Isaac to step back a bit, to take on only the horse training work he wanted to do. They had 4 grandchildren now, with another on the way, and the house that had once felt too large with just Isaac, Zara, and Donald now frequently felt too small with all the family coming and going. But it was a good kind of chaos, the kind that came from a life well lived and a family well loved. On quiet evenings when everyone had gone home and the house was peaceful again, Isaac and Zara would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, holding hands like young lovers. "Did you ever imagine this?" Zara asked one such evening. "Back when we first met, when we were dancing in that meadow, did you imagine all of this?" Isaac thought about it, really thought about it. "No," he said honestly. "I could not have imagined it because I did not know enough to imagine it. I knew I wanted you, knew I wanted to build a life with you, but I could not have known how good it would be, how full." "We were so young," Zara said softly. "I was so sure I knew what I wanted, what I needed, and then you rode down from that ridge and everything changed." "Would you do it differently?" Isaac asked. "If you could go back, knowing what you know now, not a single thing," Zara said firmly. "Well, maybe I would have kissed you sooner. We wasted a lot of time being proper when we could have been kissing." Isaac laughed and leaned over to kiss her, slow and sweet, and it felt just as good as it had when they were young and new to each other. Better, maybe, because now it carried the weight of all their years together, all their shared joys and sorrows. Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, a source of great celebration and pride across the territory. Eager, now officially in the state of Arizona, threw a party that lasted 3 days. The whole Sullivan clan attended, 3 generations celebrating together. Isaac watched his children and grandchildren dancing together and felt his heart swell with gratitude for the life he had been given. Thomas came home that year too, having finished his education. He took a position teaching music at the school in Eager, moving back into his childhood home much to Zara's delight. At 21, he was a thoughtful young man, still as determined as he had been as a child, but with a gentleness that made him a natural teacher. In 1914, Thomas met a young woman named Alice Porter, the daughter of Tom Porter, the blacksmith who had once proposed to Zara. The symmetry of it amused everyone, and Alice herself was lovely, a skilled pianist who shared Thomas's passion for music. They married in 1915, and Thomas brought Alice to live in the main house with Isaac and Zara, all of them coexisting peacefully in the large old house. The years of the Great War were hard, even in far-off Arizona. Matthew, at 33, was too old to be drafted, but they knew young men from Eager who went and did not come home. The news from Europe was terrible, and they all felt the weight of it, the sense that the world was changing in ways they did not fully understand. But life on the ranch continued as it always had. Calves were born, horses were trained, crops were planted and harvested. Matthew and Sarah had 3 children now, Eliza, Daniel, and little Margaret. Catherine and Henry had 4, spread out over the years. Thomas and Alice had twin girls in 1918, born on the same day the armistice was signed, which everyone took as a good omen. By 1920, Isaac was 63 years old, officially an old man, though he did not feel it most days. His hair was completely gray now, and his joints ached in the mornings, but he could still break a horse when he wanted to, could still dance with his wife when the mood struck them. Zara was 59, and if anything, the years had only made her more beautiful to Isaac's eyes. Her hair was silver now, worn in a neat bun most days, and her hands were gnarled from years of work, but her eyes were still the same warm brown that had captivated him that first day in the meadow. They had been married for 36 years, together for 37, and sometimes Isaac still could not quite believe his good fortune. That he had happened to ride along that ridge on that particular day, that Zara had been dancing in that meadow at that exact time, that he had found the courage to ride down and join her. It could have gone so differently. She could have sent him away, could have chosen Tom Porter or any of the other men who had courted her over the years. But she had chosen Isaac, had kept choosing him every day since, and that was a gift he never took for granted. One Sunday afternoon in late spring of 1920, Isaac suggested they take a ride out to the meadow. They had not been there in years, not since the children were small, and he had a sudden yearning to see it again, to stand in the place where their story had begun. Zara agreed immediately, and they saddled up 2 of the gentler horses and rode out together. The meadow was still there, largely unchanged despite the passage of nearly 4 decades. The wildflowers bloomed in the same profusion, painting the grass in patches of color. The aspens on the far edge rustled in the same gentle breeze. They dismounted and stood hand in hand, looking out over the meadow. "It is smaller than I remember," Zara said with a little laugh. "Or we are bigger," Isaac suggested. "We were different people then." "We were," Zara agreed. "But also the same in the ways that matter." Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Dance with me, always," Zara said, and they danced, moving slowly through the grass, no longer with the energy and exuberance of youth, but with something deeper, something richer. They had danced through nearly 40 years together, through joy and sorrow, through births and deaths, through triumph and struggle. They had never stopped moving forward, just as Isaac had promised that first day. When they finally stopped, both breathing hard from the exertion, Isaac cupped Zara's face in his hands and looked into her eyes. "I love you, Zara Sullivan. I have loved you since the moment I saw you dancing alone in this meadow, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." Tears sparkled in Zara's eyes, but she was smiling. "And I love you, Isaac Sullivan. You rode down from that ridge and changed my whole life, and I have never regretted a single moment of it." They kissed, long and sweet, and the meadow held them gently, witness to the beginning and continuation of their love story. They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, content and peaceful. The house was full when they arrived. Matthew's family had come for Sunday supper, and the noise and chaos of grandchildren filled every corner. Isaac and Zara moved through it all together, as they always had, partners in every sense of the word. That night, lying in bed with Zara tucked against his side, Isaac reflected on the incredible journey his life had been. From a restless young cowboy with no direction to a husband, father, grandfather, rancher, horse trainer. All because he had seen a woman dancing alone in a meadow and had found the courage to join her. "What are you thinking about?" Zara murmured sleepily. "About how lucky I am," Isaac said, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. "About how every good thing in my life traces back to that day in the meadow." "We made our own luck," Zara said. "We chose each other and we kept choosing each other. That was not luck. That was love." And she was right, Isaac realized. It had been love, pure and simple. Love that had sustained them through everything, that had built a family and a legacy. Love that had started with a dance and had never stopped moving forward. The years rolled on in their steady way, bringing more changes. Isaac's hair went from gray to white, and he finally had to admit that he was truly getting old. By 1925, at 68, he had officially retired from active ranch work, leaving the day-to-day operations entirely to Matthew and the various hands they employed. He still worked with horses occasionally, the ones that particularly interested him or challenged him, but mostly he was content to sit on the porch and watch the world go by. Zara was 64 and still active, still involved in running the household, though she had help now from Alice and from Catherine when she visited. They had 9 grandchildren spread across the 3 families, and 2 great-grandchildren already, with more on the way. The family tree that had once been so small, just Isaac and Zara and eventually Donald, had grown and branched into something complex and beautiful. In the summer of 1925, the whole family gathered to celebrate Isaac and Zara's 40th wedding anniversary. It was a massive affair, held at the ranch with people coming from all over Arizona. Matthew had arranged for a band to play, and there was dancing and food and laughter that lasted late into the night. At one point, the band struck up an old waltz, and Matthew called for everyone to clear the floor. "This dance belongs to the guests of honor," he announced, and everyone cheered as Isaac led Zara onto the makeshift dance floor. They moved together as they had for 40 years, knowing each other's rhythms instinctively, anticipating each turn and step. Isaac looked into his wife's eyes and saw the same love reflected back at him that he had seen that first day in the meadow, undimmed by time or hardship. 40 years, Zara said softly as they danced. "Can you believe it? Some days yes, some days no," Isaac admitted. "Some days it feels like we just met yesterday. Other days it feels like we have always been together, like there was never a time before us." "I hope we have 40 more," Zara said. "I will take whatever time we are given," Isaac replied. "As long as I have you, I have everything I need." The party went on around them, but for that moment, they were alone in their own world, just as they had been in the meadow all those years ago. The music, the people, the passage of time, all of it faded away until there was nothing but the two of them, moving together, hearts beating in sync. When the song ended and the crowd erupted in applause, Isaac bowed formally to Zara, and she curtsied back, both of them laughing at the formality of it. Then they were surrounded by their children and grandchildren, everyone wanting to hug them and congratulate them and tell them how much they were loved. Standing in the center of that loving chaos, Isaac felt a profound sense of completion. He had built this, he and Zara together. This family, this legacy, This love that had grown and multiplied until it encompassed so many lives. It was more than he could have ever dreamed of that day when he was a lonely cowboy riding fence lines. As the night wore on and the older folks began to drift home, Isaac found himself standing on the porch with Zara, watching the young people still dancing. Matthew was spinning Sarah around with the same enthusiasm he had shown at their own wedding. Catherine and Henry were dancing close, whispering to each other and smiling. Thomas had Alice in his arms, both of them swaying gently to the music. "We did good," Zara said, leaning against Isaac's shoulder. "We did," Isaac agreed. "Better than good. We did extraordinary." They stood there together, watching the next generation make their own memories, their own joy. And Isaac knew that this was what life was really about. Not the big moments or the grand gestures, though those had their place. It was about the accumulation of small moments, the daily choice to love and be loved, the steady forward motion of building a life with someone. He had joined Zara's dance that day in the meadow, and he had never stopped moving forward. Through challenges and triumphs, through losses that had broken his heart and joys that had healed it, he had kept moving forward with Zara at his side. And he would keep moving forward for as long as his legs could carry him and his heart could beat, because that was what he had promised her, implicitly if not explicitly, that first day, to dance with her and to never stop moving forward. The years that followed were gentler, slower. Isaac's health began to decline in his early 70s, nothing specific or dramatic, just the general wearing down that comes with age. He spent more time in his chair on the porch, wrapped in blankets even on warm days, but he was content. Zara was there beside him, her hand in his, and that was enough. They watched their grandchildren grow and marry and have children of their own. The ranch continued to prosper under Matthew's management, and the horse training operation that Isaac had started was now one of the most respected in Arizona. The Sullivan name meant something in ranching circles, meant quality and integrity and fair dealing, and Isaac was proud of that legacy. Thomas had become the music teacher for the entire county, traveling from school to school, and the sound of music had come back to the ranch in a way it had not been since Zara's mother was alive. Alice taught piano lessons in town, and their twin girls were showing remarkable musical talent even at young ages. Catherine and Henry had settled in Eager permanently, with Henry serving as the county judge. Their children were scattered, some having gone on to college, others having married and started families of their own. The Simmons-Sullivan clan was large and growing, a testament to Catherine's vibrant personality and generous heart. In the spring of 1930, Isaac turned 73. It was a quiet birthday, celebrated with just immediate family, and Isaac was grateful for the peace of it. He was tired these days, tired in a way that sleep did not fix, and he knew that his time was growing short, but he was not afraid. How could he be afraid when he had lived such a full life, when he was surrounded by so much love? He had loved and been loved in return. He had built something lasting, something that would continue long after he was gone. That was more than most men could say. One evening in late May, as the sun set over the ranch, Isaac asked Zara to help him out to the meadow one last time. She understood without him having to explain, and together with Matthew's help, they loaded into the wagon and made the short journey to where it had all begun. Matthew helped Isaac down from the wagon and settled him on a blanket in the grass, then discreetly retreated to give his parents privacy. Zara sat beside Isaac and they watched the sunset together, their hands clasped tight. "You remember?" Isaac asked, his voice weak but steady. "Every moment," Zara said, tears streaming down her face. "I remember every single moment." "I would do it all again," Isaac told her, Every hardship, every struggle, every heartbreak just to have this life with you." "I know," Zara said. "I would too." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to pink to deep purple. The meadow grass whispered around them, and somewhere in the distance, a bird sang its evening song. It was peaceful, perfect, a fitting end to a story that had begun in this exact spot so many years ago. "I love you," Isaac said, the words he had spoken countless times over 47 years but which still carried the same weight, the same truth. "I will always love you, even after I am gone. I will be waiting for you whenever you are ready." "I love you too," Zara said, holding his hand to her cheek. "And I will find you again. In this life or the next I will find you and we will dance again." Isaac smiled at peace. He had kept his promise. He had joined her dance and never stopped moving forward. And now, as his life drew to its close, he knew that he had lived well, loved well, and left behind a legacy that would endure. He closed his eyes, Zara's hand still in his, and let the peace of the meadow wash over him one final time. Isaac Sullivan died as the last light faded from the sky, in the same meadow where he had first seen his wife dancing all those years ago. Zara held him as he passed, singing the same melody she had been humming that first day, and though her heart was breaking, she was grateful that they had been given this ending, this chance to come full circle. They buried Isaac on the hill next to Donald, overlooking the ranch he had helped build. The funeral was huge, people coming from all over Arizona to pay their respects to a man who had touched so many lives. Matthew gave the eulogy, speaking of his father's integrity, his kindness, his unwavering love for his family. There was not a dry eye in the crowd. Zara weathered her grief with the same strength she had weathered everything else in her life. She missed Isaac with an ache that never fully went away, but she found comfort in her children and grandchildren, in the ranch that she and Isaac had built together. She lived for another 8 years, long enough to see great-great-grandchildren born, long enough to know that the legacy she and Isaac had created would continue. In the spring of 1938, at the age of 77, Zara's health began to fail. She had been robust for most of her life, but the years were catching up with her at last. Matthew wanted to move her to a hospital in the bigger town, but Zara refused. She wanted to be at home, in the house she had lived in for her entire married life. On a warm afternoon in April, with wildflowers blooming across the ranch, Zara asked Matthew to carry her out to the meadow. Her children and grandchildren gathered there, 3 generations coming together to honor the matriarch of their family. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Zara closed her eyes and slipped away peacefully, a smile on her face. Those who were there said that just before she died, she reached out her hand as if someone was taking it, as if someone was asking her to dance. They buried her next to Isaac, and on the shared headstone, they carved both their names and a simple inscription. They danced together and never stopped moving forward. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, but the meadow where Isaac and Zara had first met became a sacred place for the family. Every year on the anniversary of their first meeting, the Sullivan descendants would gather there to remember and celebrate the love story that had started it all. And sometimes, people claimed, on quiet evenings when the light was just right, you could see 2 figures dancing in the meadow, moving together in perfect harmony, joined forever in a dance that death itself could not end. The legacy of Isaac and Zara Sullivan lived on in countless ways. In the ranch that still bore their name a century later, in the horse training techniques that Isaac had pioneered and that were still taught and used, in the music program that Thomas had started and that had produced generations of talented musicians. in the values of hard work, integrity, and love that they had instilled in their children, and that had been passed down through the years. But perhaps their greatest legacy was the love story itself, the tale of a lonely cowboy who saw a woman dancing alone in a meadow and found the courage to join her. It became a family legend, told and retold, growing in the telling but never losing its essential truth. That love, real love, requires courage and commitment and the willingness to keep moving forward no matter what challenges life throws at you. Matthew lived to be 90, managing the ranch well into his 80s before finally passing it on to his own children. He never forgot the lessons his father had taught him about integrity and hard work and the importance of choosing love every single day. He and Sarah were married for 63 years before Sarah passed, and Matthew followed her within 6 months. Unable to imagine life without his partner, Catherine became a force in Arizona politics, advocating for women's rights and educational reform until her death at 87. She credited her parents with teaching her that a woman could be both strong and loving, both independent and devoted to family. She and Henry had been married for 59 years when he passed, and Catherine spent her remaining years writing a family history that preserved Isaac and Zara's story for future generations. Thomas taught music for 45 years, influencing thousands of students and bringing the joy of music to rural Arizona. He and Alice were married for 56 years, and their twin daughters both became music teachers as well, carrying on the family tradition. Thomas always said that his parents had taught him that there were many ways to build a legacy, and not all of them involved ranching. The ranch itself grew and changed over the decades, adapting to new technologies and new markets, but the core of it remained the same. It was a family operation, built on the foundation that Isaac and Zara had laid, sustained by the values they had lived. Through depression and prosperity, through drought and plenty, through war and peace, it endured. And through it all, the meadow remained, protected by successive generations who understood its significance. They never built on it, never grazed it too heavily, never allowed it to be spoiled or changed. It was kept as it had been that day in 1883, when a young cowboy named Isaac Sullivan saw a young woman named Zara Fitzgerald dancing alone and decided to join her. Because some places are sacred, not because of what happened there, but because of what started there. And that meadow was where a love story began that would echo through generations, inspiring those who came after to be brave enough to join the dance, to take the risk, to choose love even when it was uncertain or difficult. Isaac and Zara had shown that it was possible to build a life of meaning and purpose, that love was not just a feeling but a choice made over and over again. They had shown that the courage to start was important, but the commitment to continue was even more so. They had danced together for 47 years, through joy and sorrow, through youth and age, and they had never stopped moving forward, and that, in the end, was the truest measure of their success. Not the land they had accumulated or the wealth they had built, but the love they had nurtured and the family they had raised. They had taken their meeting in that meadow and transformed it into a legacy that would last for generations, touching lives they would never know, inspiring people they would never meet. The story of the cowboy and the woman dancing in the meadow became more than just a family legend. It became a reminder that the best things in life often start with a moment of courage, a willingness to step out of safety and into the unknown. It became a testament to the power of love to transform and sustain, to the importance of partnership and mutual respect. And so the story endures, passed down from parent to child, from grandparent to grandchild, changing in small details but remaining true in its essence. The story of how Isaac Sullivan saw Zara Fitzgerald dancing alone in a meadow in 1883 and had the courage to join her. How they danced together that first day and kept dancing for the rest of their lives. How they never stopped moving forward, no matter what obstacles they faced, because they had each other, and that was enough. It is a love story, simple and profound, the kind that reminds us why we tell stories in the first place. To remember, to inspire, to connect us to those who came before and to those who will come after. To show us that love, true love, is worth the risk, worth the commitment, worth everything. And in a meadow outside Eagar, Arizona, where wildflowers still bloom and grass still sways in the breeze, the echo of their dance continues, a testament to a love that time could not diminish and death could not end. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is join the dance and never stop moving forward.